She stood in the middle of the ballroom, laughter echoing around her like shattered glass. Everyone saw her break, but no one saw the fire being born behind her tears. "Hi, my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Thank you so for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin." The chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 watching eyes. The ballroom pulsed with wealth, gold cuffs, diamond bracelets, and laughter that rang like crystal. It was Ethan Cross's annual mid-year success gala, a night where billionaires toasted their dominance and everyone pretended to be part of his world. Alina Grant Cross stood quietly beside her husband, her champagne untouched, her hands clasped too tightly around the glass stem. She looked like a misplaced softness in a world built from marble and ego. Her light blue gown flowed like water, delicate and elegant, but to the women who circled her, it was too simple. Their eyes said it all. "Alina, you're so quiet tonight," a socialite purred, adjusting her diamond necklace. "You must be used to all this by now, living in the shadow of such a powerful man." Laughter followed. Polite. Sharp. Ethan smiled, not at his wife, but at their amusement. "She prefers books to parties," he said, lifting his glass. "And conversations with her plants." The table erupted in laughter. Even the waiter paused, uncertain whether to smile. Alina's throat tightened. She looked at Ethan, searching his face for warmth, something, anything, but saw only charm polished into cruelty. She forced a laugh. "Well, at least my plants listen," she whispered softly. The laughter died. Ethan's smile faltered for half a second. But he recovered, brushing her hand away when she reached for him. That tiny rejection cut deeper than the words. Later that night, when the gala's lights dimmed and the music softened to a slow jazz hum, Ethan basked in the attention of investors, his arm draped casually over the back of a chair, the very chair she had just vacated. Alina stood near the balcony, her reflection in the glass shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. Outside, the city stretched wide and endless, a constellation of lives. Each light reminded her of who she used to be before Ethan Cross, the literature teacher who believed in second chances, who thought love could heal arrogance, who thought she could change him. She had traded her passion for poetry for a penthouse and found herself invisible. Ethan approached her at last, swirling his drink lazily. "You disappeared," he said. "I needed air," she replied softly. "It's loud in there." He chuckled. "That's what happens when people celebrate success, darling. You should try enjoying it." She turned, her eyes meeting his. "You humiliated me, Ethan." He blinked, surprised at her tone. "It was a joke." "No," she said, voice trembling but steady. "It was a reminder that you think you're the sun, and I should just orbit quietly." He laughed again, low and cruel. "Oh, Alina. Not everything's about you." That broke something inside her. Her hand trembled as she set her glass down. "No, not everything," she said. "Just enough to destroy what's left of us." She turned to walk away, but his next words froze her in place. "Where would you even go?" he said lightly, sipping his drink. "You wouldn't last a week without this life." Her body went still, then slowly she turned to face him. "I used to live without this life," she said. "And I was happier." The silence that followed was heavy. A few guests nearby glanced their way. Ethan, suddenly aware of the audience, gave a sharp laugh, a shield for his pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly, raising his glass. "My wife, the philosopher of broken dreams." The laughter that followed was louder this time. Crueler. Her vision blurred. She didn't remember walking out, just the cold night air slicing her lungs as she stepped outside. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white as tears streamed down her cheeks. The doorman called after her, but she didn't stop. She walked aimlessly for blocks, heels clicking against pavement, until she found herself standing before a small cafe she used to visit before she married him. The sign was faded, the same barista still behind the counter, humming softly. For a moment, she just stood there, torn between shame and longing. Then she whispered to herself, "I don't belong to him anymore." Her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. A single text. "Come back inside. You're embarrassing me." She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she typed back, "No. You already did that for both of us." She deleted it, then put the phone away and walked inside the cafe. The warmth, the scent of ground coffee, the faint hum of a jazz station, all of it felt like a memory waiting to be reborn. She took a seat near the window, wiped her tears, and opened her notebook, the one she hadn't written in since her wedding. On the first blank page, she wrote one sentence. He laughed. "I'll build a life that doesn't need his approval to feel real." She exhaled. For the first time in years, her breath didn't hurt. If the person who promised to love you made you the punchline in public, what would you do? Walk away, or stay and make them see your worth? The morning sun broke through the penthouse windows, gilding the city skyline in pale gold. Inside, silence clung to the air like frost. The laughter from the gala was gone, but its echo still rang in Alina's mind, that cruel symphony of mockery that had shredded her pride. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bruise-like reflection of herself in the mirror. Mascara smudged. Eyes red. A faint tremor in her hands. The woman looking back at her didn't seem real. Ethan's voice from the other room was calm, casual, as if nothing had happened. "Coffee, Alina? Or are we pretending to be offended all morning?" She didn't answer. He walked in, crisp in his tailored shirt, a golden cufflink glinting in the light. "You're overreacting," he said. "Everyone knew it was a joke." She turned slowly. "A joke that made me the fool." He sighed, setting the cup down on the dresser. "You're too sensitive. This," he gestured to the sprawling penthouse, "isn't for thin-skinned people. You knew who I was when you married me." She nodded, her voice soft but cutting. "I did. I just didn't know what you'd become." He frowned, defensive. "Become? I'm still the same man." "That's exactly the problem." There was a pause. A silence so heavy it seemed to press against the walls. Then Alina stood. "Ethan, do you even remember the last time you asked how I was?" He blinked. "We're not doing this." "No," she said, steady now. "We're finally doing this." She walked past him, opened the closet, and began to pull her things down. Neat, efficient, deliberate. Her hands stopped shaking. Each folded dress, each packed item felt like a reclaimed piece of her soul. "Alina, stop. Don't be ridiculous. I'm leaving." He laughed, but it didn't sound confident this time. It cracked at the edges. "Leave? And go where? Back to your tiny apartment? Back to your poetry readings and broken dreams?" Her eyes met his. Calm. Clear. "I'd rather have broken dreams," she said quietly, "than live inside someone else's nightmare." He froze. For the first time, Ethan Cross, the man who could buy anything, silence anyone, had nothing to say. When she stepped out of the penthouse, she carried only a single suitcase and her old notebook. The doorman looked at her in surprise but said nothing. The elevator ride down felt endless. When the doors opened, the cool air hit her face like freedom. She called a cab. As it pulled away from the building, she didn't look back. But halfway down Fifth Avenue, her phone buzzed again. "Ethan. Ethan, you'll regret this. Ethan, you won't last a week." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I won't," she murmured. "But I'll finally be me again." The next few weeks were harder than she imagined. Her savings were limited. She rented a small one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn with peeling wallpaper and a heater that groaned at night. She sold her designer handbags to pay for groceries. But there was something strangely comforting in simplicity. She walked to the nearby park every morning, notebook in hand, and wrote poems, plans, lists of ideas. She'd once worked part-time as a writing tutor. Maybe she could do that again. Maybe she could build something of her own. On the third week, she got a job as a freelance editor for a small publishing firm. The pay was modest, but the first time she got her own paycheck, she cried. Not from sadness, from the feeling of ownership. She began rebuilding, brick by invisible brick. At night, she would light a single candle, sit by the window, and whisper to herself. He laughed at me once. Let him laugh again. This time, I'll give him a reason. Back at the penthouse, Ethan's world began to fray. Her absence wasn't quiet anymore. It was loud, echoing through every empty room. The morning coffee didn't taste right. The silence of her laughter became unbearable. He told himself he didn't care. He drowned himself in meetings, brand launches, and champagne. But when he came home, the emptiness waited, patient, unrelenting. One night, as he poured himself another drink, his assistant entered hesitantly. Sir, the investors are growing concerned. Sales dropped this quarter. The board wants a statement. Ethan waved him off. Handled. But it wasn't. Nothing was. Because while his empire cracked quietly, Alina's new chapter was beginning. One chilly evening, as she left her office, a sleek car pulled up beside her. The tinted window rolled down. Inside was Daniel Hayes, an older gentleman with kind eyes, the CEO of a rising publishing network. You're Alina Cross, he asked. Alina Grant, she corrected softly. He smiled. I read your work. You've got something rare, heart and steel. I could use someone like you on my team. Her breath caught. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a future, he said simply. As his car drove away, Alina stood there, stunned, a tear slipping down her cheek, not from sadness but disbelief. The universe, it seemed, had heard her whisper. That night, she looked at her reflection again, but this time, it wasn't a woman broken by laughter. It was a woman reborn through silence. Her phone lit up again. Ethan. Another message. Are you ever coming back? She stared at it for a long time before replying. No. But I hope you finally see what you lost. Then she blocked the number. Outside her window, the city lights shimmered. And somewhere inside her chest, the first spark of strength turned into flame. Would you walk away from someone who laughed at your pain, even if it meant starting over from zero? Or would you forgive and stay? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious how many of you would choose freedom over comfort. The office lights flickered as the last editors left for the night. Alina sat alone in the quiet hum of computers and coffee machines, her pen tapping softly against the desk. It was 10:37 p.m. She had deadlines to meet, manuscripts to review, and a fragile new life to hold together. Her fingers ached, but she didn't stop. Each word she edited was a promise to herself, that she would never again depend on someone else's mercy. She leaned back, rubbing her neck, and let her gaze drift toward the window. Outside, the rain streaked down the glass like liquid memory. Somewhere across the city, she imagined Ethan standing in his penthouse, still believing he was untouchable. Her lips curved faintly. You'll see, she whispered. You'll see what real power looks like. The next morning at Cross Holdings, Ethan slammed a stack of financial reports onto his desk. His assistant, Liam, winced. Sir, it's not as bad as it looks. It's worse, Ethan cut in. Our stock dropped another 3 points overnight. Who approved the marketing campaign for the Sapphire line? You did, sir. Ethan froze. His jaw tightened. Then find someone else to blame, he muttered, rubbing his temples. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. The nights stretched long and bitter, filled with the sound of his own thoughts, thoughts he had never allowed himself to feel. At first, he told himself Alina's absence was peaceful. No more soft questions. No more disapproving eyes when he came home late. But then, her silence began to haunt him. He'd reach for his phone to text her, then stop. He'd walk into the kitchen and expect to see her morning note on the fridge, then remember she was gone. He was a man surrounded by everything and owned by nothing. Meanwhile, Alina's life was transforming in small, unseen ways. Her new boss, Daniel Hayes, had a way of bringing out her brilliance. "You have a rare voice, Alina," he told her one afternoon, as they reviewed a marketing draft. "Most people write to impress. You write to connect. Don't lose that." His words touched something deep inside her, a part of her that had long been starved for recognition. She began contributing more ideas, staying late, volunteering for difficult projects. Colleagues who once overlooked her began to listen. But every night, when she got home to her tiny apartment, the exhaustion hit hard. Bills piled up. The heater still groaned. She missed the softness of a real bed. Sometimes she caught herself scrolling through old photos, her and Ethan laughing on a yacht, champagne flutes raised. She'd swipe away before the ache could grow. "Don't look back," she'd whisper. He laughed. "You rebuild." Still, even strength has its quiet breaking points. One night, she found herself crying without knowing why. She wasn't sad, just tired. Tired of being strong. Tired of pretending the past didn't matter. She pressed her hand against her chest and whispered, "This pain, it's just the echo of a woman I used to be." Ethan, too, was cracking. Board members questioned his leadership. Investors whispered about emotional instability. Rumors spread that his marriage trouble had started to affect his decisions. One morning, as he entered a board meeting, an older member pulled him aside. "Ethan," he said carefully, "you've always been sharp. But lately, you're distracted. If you don't steady the ship, someone else will." Ethan's reply was curt. "I'm fine." But the truth was, he wasn't. After the meeting, he sat in his office staring at his reflection in the glass. The skyline behind him blurred into a smear of gray. He thought of Alina's last words before she left. "I'd rather have broken dreams than live inside someone else's nightmare." He gripped the edge of his desk. For the first time, those words hurt. 2 months later, Alina's rise became impossible to ignore. Her name began to circulate in publishing circles, the editor with the golden instinct. Daniel trusted her with high-profile projects, and soon, she was leading her own team. She wore her confidence like armor now. Even her walk had changed, slower, deliberate, certain. Still, the nights were quiet. Success filled her days, but solitude filled her evenings. And yet, she found peace in it. For the first time, she belonged to herself. Ethan didn't learn about her success until a business lunch with a media investor. "She's brilliant," the man said, scrolling through his tablet. "You know her, Alina Grant. Used to be married to, what was his name? Ethan Cross, right?" Ethan froze mid-sip. The man continued, oblivious. "She's a powerhouse. She's been advising on a few company image turnarounds. Word is, Hayes Media might expand into corporate consulting next quarter. She's their secret weapon." The coffee turned bitter in Ethan's mouth. "Interesting," he managed to say, setting the cup down too carefully. That night, he stood by the penthouse window, the same one she had once stared out of, and whispered into the empty air, "You're really doing it, without me." He tried to laugh, but his throat burned. In the months that followed, fate began to tighten the invisible thread between them. Their names appeared in the same circles again. Their companies began bidding on similar projects. The universe, quietly, was setting the stage for something inevitable. Alina didn't know it yet, but the next time she'd see Ethan Cross, it wouldn't be as his wife. It would be as his rival. When someone hurts you deeply, do you believe revenge is in rising higher, or in simply finding peace? Be honest. Which would you choose? The morning began like any other. Alina arrived early, coffee in hand, ready to dive into another day of proposals and strategy briefs. She didn't know that by nightfall, her entire world was about to collide with the one she thought she'd left behind. "Alina," Daniel called from his office. "Got a minute?" She stepped in, adjusting her blazer. Daniel smiled, that easy, confident grin that made everyone feel capable. "I've just been invited to a major partnership meeting," he said, handing her a sleek folder. "Cross Holdings wants to merge one of their publishing arms with us. I want you to represent Hayes Media alongside me." Her heartbeat stilled. Cross Holdings. For a moment, the name hung in the air like a ghost. "Any problem with that?" Daniel asked, watching her closely. She forced a calm smile. "None at all." But inside, her pulse was roaring. 2 days later, she found herself standing in the mirrored lobby of the Cross Holdings Tower, the same place she'd once entered as a wife, now walking in as a rival executive. Everything looked the same: the marble floors, the towering glass walls, the cold hush of wealth. But she wasn't the same woman. She wasn't the one who waited in the car for him to finish his meetings. She wasn't the one who laughed politely at his jokes. She was here now as power. When the elevator doors opened onto the top floor, she took a deep breath and stepped out. And there he was. Ethan Cross, the man who had once laughed at her in front of everyone, now standing behind his desk in a tailored navy suit, looking exactly as composed and commanding as ever. For half a heartbeat, the room froze. He blinked, once, twice, as if unsure whether she was real. Then his jaw tightened, and that signature smirk flickered across his lips. "Alina." "Mr. Cross," she replied, her voice cool as marble. The meeting began. Daniel introduced the proposal with easy professionalism, but Ethan's gaze never truly left Alina. Every slide she presented, every confident word she spoke, it chipped away at his composure. She was brilliant, sharp, controlled, everything he used to underestimate. When Daniel paused to take a call, the two of them were left alone in the boardroom. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You've changed." Alina met his gaze without blinking. "No, Ethan. I just stopped shrinking." His smile faltered for a second, then he recovered. "Impressive speech. But don't mistake confidence for power. You're still in my building." She leaned forward slightly, her tone razor-soft. "Buildings crumble, Ethan. People rise." The silence between them pulsed with old emotion, anger, pain, and something unspoken that still burned. That night, after the meeting ended, Ethan found himself pacing his office long after everyone else had gone home. He couldn't stop seeing her face, the calm strength in her eyes, the effortless way she now held a room. "Damn it," he muttered, slamming a file shut. He had expected to see bitterness in her, maybe even jealousy. But there was none. She didn't hate him. She simply didn't need him. And that unsettled him more than anything. He walked to the window and stared out over the city lights. Below, cars streamed like veins of gold through the dark. He remembered the night she left, the way her heels echoed down the hall. He hadn't run after her. He'd let her go, certain she'd crawl back. But she hadn't. And now, here she was, back in his world, but higher than before. Meanwhile, Alina sat at home, replaying the meeting in her mind. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the flood of memories. She'd faced him, and she hadn't flinched. Still, a small part of her ached. She had loved that man once. Truly, deeply. And love doesn't disappear just because dignity demanded it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "You were extraordinary today. Proud of you, partner." She smiled, a genuine one this time. "Thank you, Daniel." She didn't know why, but that word, partner, felt like a beginning. 2 days later, a confidential email from Ethan's company landed in her inbox. Subject: Project Phoenix Collaboration, Confidential Follow-up. Her eyes widened. The email invited her to co-lead the merger negotiations over the next few months. Meaning, she would be working directly with Ethan Cross. She stared at the screen, torn between disbelief and curiosity. Daniel noticed her hesitation. "We can assign someone else if you're uncomfortable." Alina inhaled slowly. "No. I'll handle it." Daniel nodded, trusting her judgment. As she closed her laptop that night, she whispered to herself. Let him see what he lost, and what I've become. The following weeks were a storm of late-night meetings, strategy sessions, and tension-filled silences. Every interaction between Alina and Ethan was a duel, sharp words wrapped in polite smiles. At one point, during a heated discussion about brand control, Ethan snapped, "You really think you can outplay me?" Alina shot back without hesitation, "I don't need to outplay you, Ethan. I just need to win." He stared at her, a mix of anger and admiration flickering across his face. For the first time, he realized he might actually lose. One evening, after yet another tense meeting, Ethan followed her into the hallway. "Alina, wait." She turned, her expression unreadable. "I didn't mean what I said that night," he said quietly. "When I laughed at you." She tilted her head. "Didn't you?" He hesitated. "I was angry. You made me feel small." She gave a faint, sad smile. "And now you know how it feels." Then she walked away, her heels echoing down the corridor, the same sound that had once haunted his nights. When your ex finally realizes your worth, would you give them another chance, or make them watch you rise without them? Tell me your truth in the comments. The boardroom tension between Alina and Ethan continued for weeks, but beneath the sharp exchanges and cold professionalism, something deeper churned: memory. Every time Ethan looked at her, flashes of their old life crept in, the laughter, the warmth, the quiet evenings before everything turned bitter. But this wasn't nostalgia. It was haunting. He had spent years convincing himself she was weak, unambitious, but now she sat across from him, brilliant and composed, leading deals with precision he could barely keep up with. And as his empire began to wobble from market pressure, he realized something horrifying. The only person who could save his company was the woman he'd destroyed. It started with a rumor. Whispers spread across Cross Holdings' upper floors, missed deadlines, shaky investments, internal leaks. Ethan dismissed them at first, but then a single report hit his desk. Losses in subsidiary branches exceed $40 million. Potential investor withdrawal pending. He froze. In a desperate move, he called an emergency board meeting. But when he arrived, half the seats were empty, and the ones that were filled held expressions of quiet betrayal. His CFO cleared her throat. "Mr. Cross, the merger with Hayes Media might be our only way to stabilize. But they'll want majority control." Ethan's jaw tightened. Meaning, she said carefully, "you'll have to hand over decision authority to them." To her. Across town, Alina received the news with quiet disbelief. Daniel was the first to tell her. "Cross Holdings wants to renegotiate, they're on the edge of collapse." She stared at him. "Ethan's company?" He nodded. "They'll need our capital. Which means, you'll have control of the merger." For a long moment, Alina said nothing. Then she whispered, "Control." The same word Ethan had thrown at her when he'd mocked her years ago. "You'll never have control, Alina. You're just decoration." Now the universe was rewriting that scene. That night, Alina couldn't sleep. She walked out to her balcony, the city glittering below like scattered diamonds. Her reflection stared back from the glass, calm, beautiful, successful. But something in her chest still ached. "Why do I still care?" she murmured. "After everything." She remembered the laughter in that restaurant, the humiliation, the way her hands had trembled as he'd dismissed her dreams in front of everyone. She had built her life on that pain, every success a brick in the fortress she raised against ever being small again. But now that she had the power, the question lingered: what will you do with it? If you had the power to crush someone who once broke you, would you use it for revenge or redemption? Be honest. What would you do? The next morning, Alina walked into the Cross Holdings conference room like a queen entering her court. The entire board was there, and Ethan at the head of the table, visibly frayed but still trying to command authority. She took the seat opposite him. "Ms. Rivers," the CFO began formally, "thank you for agreeing to meet. We're proposing a controlling interest handover in exchange for a cash infusion of $200 million. Alina's gaze shifted to Ethan. So I'd be in charge. He didn't look away. Temporarily. Her lips curved faintly. You've always hated temporary things, Ethan. He flinched, the first visible crack in his composure. By the end of the meeting, it was official. Hayes Media, through Alina, now owned 51% of Cross Holdings. In one stroke, the man who had once laughed at her was forced to sign away his power, to her. Ethan's signature trembled slightly as he pushed the papers across the table. Congratulations, he said, voice low. You win. Alina looked down at the contract, then back up at him. No, Ethan. I survived. That's different. Later that evening, Alina sat in her office, staring at the contract. She should have felt victorious, but all she felt was heavy. Daniel stepped in quietly. You did it. You own him, his company, the entire empire. You're unstoppable. Alina smiled faintly. Unstoppable feels lonely sometimes. Daniel frowned. You still care, don't you? She hesitated, then whispered, maybe I care that he finally knows how it feels to lose everything. Daniel gave a soft chuckle. Careful, Alina. Sometimes revenge looks a lot like heartbreak in disguise. That night, as rain streaked down the windows of Cross Tower, Ethan sat in his empty office. He was alone. Truly alone. The employees who once worshipped him had gone silent. The board had shifted their loyalty. The press was already calling the merger a strategic takeover led by Alina Rivers. He poured himself a drink and stared at his reflection in the dark glass. For the first time in years, he didn't see power. He saw regret. He remembered the day Alina had walked out. Not the shouting, not the anger, but her last words. One day, you'll understand what love without respect costs. And now, he did. He reached for his phone, scrolled to her number, then stopped. He couldn't call her. Not like this. Not when she was everything he wasn't anymore, whole, radiant, unbroken. The next morning, Ethan arrived at work to find Alina already there. She was standing by the window of his old office, her office now, studying the skyline. You're early, he said quietly. She turned. I could say the same. There was a long silence, the kind that hums with too much unsaid. Then Ethan spoke. I meant it, you know. The things you said you wanted, the children's fund, the literacy programs. I mocked them, but you were right. I was just too proud to see it. Her expression softened slightly, the first flicker of the woman she once was with him. Why tell me this now? She asked. He sighed. Because losing you taught me more about power than owning everything ever did. She looked away, her throat tightening. I didn't want you to lose, she whispered. I wanted you to see. And for the first time, Ethan's eyes shimmered with something like remorse. As the rain cleared outside, a thin beam of sunlight spilled across the glass, illuminating both of them, standing not as enemies anymore, but as two people finally beginning to see each other again. But neither spoke. Not yet. The next few weeks unfolded with surprising ease. Under Alina's leadership, the merger stabilized quickly. Departments once hostile to change began to adapt. Morale improved. Projects that had been abandoned under Ethan's arrogance began to breathe again, this time with purpose. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about meaning. And though Ethan was technically no longer in charge, he still showed up, quietly, consistently. He didn't interrupt meetings anymore. He didn't bark orders. He just helped. Offered advice when asked. Observed when not. And for the first time in years, Alina saw the man she had fallen in love with. Not the billionaire who had mocked her, but the man who used to surprise her with morning coffee and talk about building something beautiful together. One late evening, she found him alone in the conference room, sleeves rolled up, papers spread everywhere. Still here? She asked softly. He looked up, faint smile tugging at his lips. Old habits die hard. She stepped closer. You don't have to stay. The team can handle the reports. He shrugged. Maybe I like being useful again. Something in his tone caught her, not pride, not ego, but vulnerability. It made her heart ache. She leaned against the table beside him. You were always useful, Ethan. You just forgot what it meant. He looked at her, really looked, and for a long moment neither spoke. Outside, the city pulsed with light. Inside, the silence was almost sacred. He broke it first. Do you ever think about before? Her breath hitched. Sometimes. Mostly when I'm too tired to stop myself. He chuckled quietly, but there was sadness behind it. I think about that night, the one where I humiliated you. I wish I could erase it. She looked down. You can't erase pain, Ethan. You live with it until it teaches you something. He nodded slowly. And what did it teach you? Alina smiled faintly. That love without respect is just loneliness in disguise. The words hung in the air between them like fragile glass. Ethan's voice softened. And what about me? What did I teach you? She turned to him, eyes glimmering. That power can destroy, but regret can rebuild. Something cracked in his expression then, not pride, not anger, but remorse. Real and raw. He leaned forward slightly. You deserved better than me. Alina exhaled. Maybe. But you were part of how I became who I am. So maybe, that's okay. For a moment, their hands brushed on the table. Neither moved away. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was recognition. The kind that makes forgiveness feel possible. The next day, Daniel noticed the shift. He walked into Alina's office, raising an eyebrow. You've been smiling a lot lately. Something I should know. Alina hid her smile behind a coffee cup. Just good results. Daniel leaned on her desk. Good results don't make you glow like that. She laughed softly. You're imagining things. But Daniel didn't look convinced. Just remember, not every man who regrets losing you deserves a second chance. She nodded slowly. I know. But sometimes forgiveness isn't for them, it's for us. Later that week, Alina and Ethan were invited to represent the merged company at a corporate charity gala, the same annual event where, years ago, he had mocked her in front of the world. Walking into that ballroom again felt surreal. The chandeliers, the champagne, the laughter, everything was the same. But the woman walking beside Ethan Cross wasn't the same. As they entered, heads turned. Conversations paused. Is that Alina Rivers? She's with Ethan Cross again? She owns his company now, didn't you hear? Whispers rippled like electricity, but this time, Alina stood tall, chin lifted, eyes calm. Ethan offered her his arm. You don't have to walk in with me if it makes you uncomfortable. She looked at him, and smiled faintly. I'm not uncomfortable, Ethan. Not anymore. They walked in together. Halfway through the evening, the charity host announced the night's keynote donors. Special recognition goes to Ms. Alina Rivers and Mr. Ethan Cross for establishing the Rivers Cross Youth Initiative, funding scholarships for underprivileged children across the city. The audience applauded. Cameras flashed. Alina blinked, surprised. You named it after both of us? Ethan smiled gently. It was your idea. I just wanted to remind everyone it took both of us, the dreamer and the fool. She laughed softly. You're not a fool anymore. He tilted his head. Maybe not. But I was, once. And you loved me anyway. Her laughter faded. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, and suddenly, the noise around them disappeared. In that moment, surrounded by power and pretense, they were just two people remembering how to breathe again. After the event, they stood outside beneath the soft city lights, the hum of music still echoing behind them. Ethan turned to her. Thank you. For what? For showing me what grace looks like when it's stronger than anger. Alina's smile was small but real. Grace is just another word for freedom. He looked at her. admiration and sorrow flickering in his eyes. "You're free now, Alina. You've earned it." She nodded. "And you? Are you free, Ethan?" He sighed, glancing up at the stars. "Maybe not yet. But I'm learning how to be." She hesitated, then gently touched his arm. "Then maybe there's still hope." As she walked away, the faint scent of jasmine trailed behind her, the same perfume she used to wear when they first met. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the memory wash over him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel empty. He felt grateful. Grateful that she existed. Grateful that she had become everything he was too blind to see before. And as she disappeared into the night, he whispered to himself, maybe love was never about ownership. Maybe it was about letting her shine. Have you ever forgiven someone not because they deserved it, but because you deserved peace? What did that feel like? Share your story in the comments. The gala had ended like a dream. Lights, applause, smiles. But dreams fade. And when they do, reality returns sharper than glass. 2 days later, Alina sat in her office reviewing an internal report Daniel had forwarded from the finance division. At first, she skimmed it absently. Then a highlighted note caught her eye. Transfer authorization requested by E. Cross, linked to former offshore subsidiary, pre-merger. Her heart skipped. She scrolled further. The document showed a pending transfer, a large one, from one of Cross Holdings' dormant accounts to an unknown firm. Her mind began to spin. Ethan? Was he trying to reroute company assets behind her back? She buzzed Daniel immediately. "Get me details on this," she said, voice steady but cold. He nodded. "Already on it." Hours passed. When Daniel returned, he looked uneasy. "You're not going to like this." "Tell me." "It's a consulting group Ethan used years ago to hide project funds. Looks like he's trying to buy controlling shares back from a shell investor." Quietly. Alina's blood ran cold. So after everything, the apologies, the partnership, he's still playing games. Daniel hesitated. Could be a misunderstanding, but it doesn't look good. She exhaled shakily. "No, Daniel. It looks exactly like him." That evening, Ethan walked into the building like nothing was wrong. He found Alina in the glass conference room, arms folded, expression unreadable. "Hey," he said softly. "You wanted to see me?" She turned, eyes glinting like steel. "Do you enjoy making me look like a fool?" Ethan blinked. "What are you talking about?" She slid the report across the table. "This." He glanced at it, recognition flickered instantly across his face. "I can explain," he began. Her voice cut through the air like ice. "Don't. You lied to me again." The memory of their old fight, the one that ended their marriage, seemed to replay in perfect symmetry. Him standing, trying to explain. Her, trembling with disbelief and hurt. "Alina, listen," Ethan said, stepping closer. "The account isn't what you think. It's—" "Stop!" she snapped, her voice breaking. "Do you have any idea what it took for me to trust you again? To let you near what I built?" His throat tightened. "It's not about the money." "Then what is it about, Ethan?" "Pride. Control. You still can't stand that I'm the one with the power now." He flinched. "That's not true." "Then what is true?" she demanded. "Because every time I start to believe you've changed, you prove me wrong." Silence. Thick. Heavy. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was trying to buy it back. For you." Her breath caught. "What?" He stepped forward, voice raw. "You once said this company used to stand for something, before I turned it into a trophy. I was trying to reclaim the division that funded the original literacy project, to rename it after you." Her jaw tightened. "And you thought the best way to honor me was with secrecy?" Ethan's shoulders sagged. "I didn't want you to think I was trying to fix things with money. I wanted it to be a surprise." Tears stung her eyes, but anger was stronger. Surprises are for birthdays, Ethan. Not for broken trust. The pain in his face was unbearable. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally he whispered, "I don't know how to do this right." "I never did." Alina's voice cracked. "That's the tragedy, isn't it? You had my heart. All I ever wanted was for you to see me. And now that you finally do, it's too late." He looked at her like a man drowning. "Is it?" She shook her head. "I can't do this again." And before he could speak, she turned and walked out. Rain poured that night, the kind that swallows sound and makes the city feel like it's crying with you. Alina drove home in silence, her reflection trembling in the window. Every word, every look, every moment of the last few months replayed like ghosts. She had forgiven him once. She had opened her heart, just a little, and now it hurt all over again. When she got home, she sank onto the couch, still in her work clothes, tears spilling freely. "Why can't I stop loving him?" she whispered into the quiet. The city outside gave no answer. At the same hour, Ethan sat in his dark office, staring at the unsigned documents on his desk. His assistant had told him Alina had left early, and Daniel wasn't answering his calls. He knew he'd ruined it, again. The words she'd said echoed through him. "You still can't stand that I'm the one with the power now." He buried his face in his hands. "She's right," he murmured. "I don't know how to love without trying to control." For the first time in his life, Ethan Cross cried. Not because he'd lost his company, but because he'd lost the only woman who had ever believed he could be more than his ego. Days turned into a week. Alina threw herself into work, refusing to let emotions slow her. She signed new partnerships, launched campaigns, met investors, all with calm, mechanical grace. But at night, when her penthouse lights dimmed and the world went quiet, she'd glance at her phone, half expecting his name to appear. It never did. One evening, Daniel dropped by with files for her signature. "You've done it," he said softly. "The company's never been stronger." She smiled faintly. "Then why doesn't it feel like victory?" Daniel hesitated. "Because success isn't the same as peace, Alina. You've won every battle, except the one with yourself." Her voice broke. "He broke my trust again, Daniel. I can't keep forgiving that." "Maybe forgiveness isn't the point," Daniel said gently. "Maybe it's about learning whether love can survive truth." She blinked back tears. "And if it can't?" Daniel sighed. "Then you'll know you gave it everything. And that's what makes you stronger than him." That night, Alina stood on her balcony again, rain misting softly over the city lights. She whispered to herself, "Love without trust is like glass. Once broken, it reflects nothing but the shards." But even as she said it, her heart ached, because deep down, she still wanted him to prove her wrong. When someone breaks your trust but claims they were trying to protect you, would you believe them or walk away? Be honest. Comment below. The city had moved on, but Alina hadn't. It had been 3 weeks since she last saw Ethan. 3 weeks since the night her trust shattered like glass. 3 weeks since she told herself she was done. Yet every time she looked at the skyline from her penthouse window, the same skyline she'd once dreamed of sharing with him, she felt a hollow ache that no amount of success could fill. The company was thriving. Her public image, flawless. But her soul, exhausted. She'd proven she could rise without him. Now she had to decide if she could live without him. That evening, she sat alone in the penthouse dining room, the city lights glittering through the glass walls. The long mahogany table, meant for 10, held only one place setting, a silent symbol of her solitude. She picked up her wine glass, then stopped. The echo of his voice filled her memory. "You drink too fast when you're angry, Alina." A sad laugh escaped her. "Guess I'm still angry." Then came the whisper she hated most. Maybe he wasn't lying. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Ethan sat in his empty apartment, a place stripped of luxury and filled with regret. He'd resigned from Cross Holdings quietly a week after their fight. His name, once embossed on every deal and headline, now sat in silence on old documents gathering dust. He had everything money could buy, except peace. And every night, he replayed the same moment in his head. The look in her eyes when she said, "You still can't stand that I'm the one with the power now." He finally understood. It was never about power. It was about partnership. He had mistaken control for love, and in doing so, lost both. Ethan reached for the file sitting on his desk, the one labeled, Project Aurora. Inside were the documents for the literacy foundation he'd been trying to rebuild, the one he'd planned to rename the Alina Cross Initiative. He stared at it, then whispered, "I didn't lose her because I lied. I lost her because I waited too long to tell the truth." He closed the folder, stood, and grabbed his coat. There was only one thing left to do. The next morning, Alina arrived at the company early. She had a press interview to prepare for. But the receptionist stopped her with a nervous look. "Ma'am, Mr. Cross is waiting for you upstairs." She froze. "What?" "He said he won't leave until you speak with him." Her heartbeat quickened. She wanted to tell them to send him away, but her feet moved before her pride could speak. Ethan stood in her office by the window, hands clasped, eyes tired but clear. When she entered, silence filled the air between them. The same silence that had once been warm, now felt fragile. He turned, his voice steady. "Before you tell me to leave, let me say this." Alina folded her arms, masking her racing heart. "You've said enough." He nodded. "I know. But not this." He placed the Project Aurora file on her desk. "This is what I was doing. Not stealing, not hiding. Rebuilding. I wanted to restore the division that funded literacy programs, the one you used to talk about when we were young and broke and dreaming. I wanted to name it after you." Alina's breath hitched. "You think that fixes everything?" "No," he said softly. "I don't want to fix it. I want to own it. Every mistake, every scar, every stupid thing I did to make you doubt I ever cared." Her lip trembled. "Why now, Ethan?" "Because I finally learned that love isn't a trophy or a transaction," he said. "It's trust. And I broke that. But I also learned something else. The man who laughed at you years ago doesn't exist anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. "You humiliated me, Ethan. You laughed when I was trying to prove myself." "I know," he whispered. "And I'll never forgive myself for it. But you turned that pain into power. You became everything I pretended to be." He took a step closer. "You don't owe me forgiveness. But I needed to show you I finally see you, not as the woman who left me, but as the woman I should have fought to deserve." For a long moment, Alina said nothing. Her hands shook. Her mind screamed, "Don't trust him." But her heart remembered the man who once held her hand when the world was cruel. Finally, she whispered, "Do you really mean it? That you see me now?" He nodded. "For the first time in my life." A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I don't know if I can forgive you." He smiled sadly. "Then let me spend the rest of my life proving you can." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in weeks, the tension in her chest eased. "Leave the file," she said quietly. "I'll think about it." He nodded, turned to go, then stopped at the door. "Alina," he said softly, "whether you take me back or not, the Penthouse, the company, they're yours. They always should have been." And then he walked out, leaving silence and sincerity hanging in the air. Later that night, Alina opened the Project Aurora folder. Inside was a single note in Ethan's handwriting. "You once told me the greatest luxury in life isn't wealth, it's peace. If this brings you any, then I've finally given you something worthy of you." Her tears fell freely now. For the first time, she didn't feel angry, she felt understood. And maybe that was enough to open the door again. The next morning, she walked into the boardroom for her press interview. Cameras flashed, reporters smiled, but she felt strangely calm. At the end of the meeting, she cleared her throat. "There's one last announcement," she said, her voice steady. Cross Holdings is proud to launch Project Aurora, a literacy initiative for underprivileged youth, dedicated to every woman who ever had to fight to be heard. Applause erupted. She smiled faintly, not for the cameras, but for the ghost of a man who finally learned what love really meant. That night, she stood on the balcony again, the same city lights glowing beneath her feet. Her phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "Ethan, I'm leaving for Singapore to start the foundation. Thank you for letting me try. Even if that's all it ever is, thank you." She stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Alina, maybe it's not the end. Maybe it's just time for a new beginning." She hit send. And for the first time in years, she smiled, not as a CEO, not as a wife, but as a woman who had finally learned that strength and love could exist in the same heart. Would you take back someone who finally realized your worth, but only after losing you? Drop your honest answer below. It had been 6 months since Ethan left for Singapore. 6 months since the last time Alina saw his face, and 6 months since she sent that message that read, "Maybe it's not the end." She had buried herself in work again, but this time, it felt different. Her days were full, not just of meetings and deals, but of purpose. Project Aurora had taken off beyond her wildest dreams. Every month, hundreds of children got books, scholarships, and hope. She'd walked into classrooms where small hands reached for her, whispering her name like she was a story come true. For the first time in her life, she felt at peace with her success, not because it made her powerful, but because it made her useful. And yet, on quiet nights, when the city lights softened and the wind hummed through the balcony glass, she found herself thinking of Ethan. Not the man who mocked her. Not the billionaire she once competed against. But the broken, humbled man who left her office whispering, "Then let me spend the rest of my life proving you can forgive me." She hadn't replied to him since. Do you believe people can truly change, or do they just learn how to hide their mistakes better? Tell me what you think in the comments. One morning, Alina received an email with the subject line, "Invitation, Project Aurora Global Summit, Singapore." She blinked, heart skipping a beat. The event was the first international conference for the Literacy Initiative. Her presence was requested to give the keynote. Attached to the bottom was a name she hadn't seen in months. Event organizer, Ethan Cross. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could decline. She could send a polite message, delegate it to someone else, and stay safely in her glass fortress. But her heart whispered something different this time. Go. Singapore, 2 weeks later. The air was warm and thick with humidity, and the night skyline glowed against the marina like a living jewel. Alina stepped into the glass atrium of the hotel hosting the summit. Every step echoed against marble floors, her heels clicking softly like a heartbeat. The entire space buzzed with people, journalists, philanthropists, educators. But her eyes scanned for one person. And there he was. Ethan stood near the stage, speaking with a small group. He looked leaner, calmer, his expression softened by humility. The proud arrogance that once defined him was gone. In its place was quiet confidence, the kind that comes from peace, not power. When he turned and saw her, he froze. The conversation around him faded into nothing. He excused himself, walked toward her slowly, every step heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. Alina. Her name came out like a prayer. She smiled faintly. "I heard Project Aurora went global. Congratulations." He chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I couldn't have done it without the woman who built its heart." A pause. Then she asked quietly, "So this is your redemption arc?" He looked at her, eyes sincere. "No. This is our legacy." They stood there for a moment, just two souls who'd walked through fire and finally found their way out. She noticed the faint scar near his wrist, a remnant of an accident during one of the site projects. She reached out, touched it gently. "You really changed." Ethan smiled. "Maybe I finally became the man you saw in me all along." Her throat tightened. And maybe I stopped running from the part of me that still believed you could. When she walked onto the stage that evening to give her keynote speech, Ethan watched from the crowd. Her voice was clear, strong, yet trembling with emotion. Years ago, someone laughed at me when I said dreams could be built on respect and kindness. Today, that laughter reminds me of how far we've come, because pain can be the seed of purpose if you choose to grow instead of break. This initiative, this dream, this love, isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving that second chances exist, even for hearts that forgot how to hope. The room fell silent. Then came thunderous applause. And in the front row, Ethan's eyes glistened with tears. Later that night, she found him on the rooftop terrace, looking out over the city. The air smelled of rain and jasmine. "You didn't have to leave everything behind," she said quietly. He turned. "I had to remember what mattered." She stepped closer. "And what does matter, Ethan?" He smiled sadly. "Love that doesn't need to win, only to be real." She exhaled, something fragile breaking open in her chest. "You always did have a way with words when it was too late." "Then let me try while it's still early," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, not a ring, not diamonds, but a folded photograph. It was an old picture of them on their first day as newlyweds, standing in front of a run-down apartment, grinning like fools. "You kept this," she whispered. "Every day," he said. "To remind me of who we were before money made us strangers." Her hand trembled as she took it. "And who are we now?" Ethan met her eyes. Two people who finally learned that love doesn't need an empire to stand, just honesty. A quiet tear slipped down her cheek. "You're late, Ethan." He smiled softly. "I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, with the faintest smile, she said, "Then start now." He stepped forward, hesitating, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, slow, tender, and full of everything words had failed to heal. And as they stood under the Singapore skyline, the rain began to fall, gentle, cleansing, forgiving. 1 year later, the front page of Forbes Life showed a photograph of Alina and Ethan Cross, co-founders of Aurora Global Initiatives, smiling beside a classroom full of children. The headline read, "From Scandal to Legacy, the couple who turned broken trust into hope." At the bottom of the page, in smaller print, it read, "The Penthouse, the company, the luxury life, she now shares them all. But this time, not to prove she won, only to prove she healed." That night, Alina looked out from the same penthouse balcony where she'd once felt alone. Ethan walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Still think power was the best revenge?" he teased softly. She smiled, resting her hands over his. "No. Love was." They both laughed, a quiet, beautiful sound carried away by the city wind. And somewhere between the hum of the skyline and the warmth of his heartbeat, Alina knew she had finally come full circle. The woman once laughed at by the world, now laughed with the man who learned to love her right.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. I am pretty sure you enjoyed it. We have a lot of other interesting and beautiful stories lined up for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get more amazing videos.